Good evening, everyone. I'll open this meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission at 6:31 p.m. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Reynolds,
Here.
Vice Chair Almond,
Here.
Commissioner Coronado,
Here.
Commissioner Neely,
Here.
Commissioner Rajulovich,
Present.
Commissioner Roethlisberger,
Here.
Commissioner Santana,
Here.
Commissioner Goodman. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're able to, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seeing no modifications to the agenda and nobody from staff waving to indicate we should do modifications, the agenda is approved as published. We do have one set of minutes to approve for the minutes of April 22nd, 2024, our last regular meeting. I'd ask for a motion and a second on the certification of those minutes.
Chair, I move to approve the minutes based on the clerk's certification for April 22nd.
Motion by Commissioner Santana. We have a second. Right, and we have a second. So with that, we'll call for a vote on the minutes.
Not sure we have access to the voting on here. Just a hand raise.
Let's do a thumbs up, thumbs down.
All right, very well.
7 in favor, the motion carries unanimously.
So the next item on the agenda is the public comments section. If you would like to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not otherwise on the agenda this evening, this opportunity to comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and we expect comments to be civil. If there are disrespectful or disruptive behavior, that will not be tolerated. And for your information, the Planning Commission is not authorized under the Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss, comment, or take action at this meeting on any issue that is raised by the public comment that is not a part of this agenda. We do have one person signed up for public comment, Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Planning Commission. You all look new to me because it's been many weeks, if not months, since you met. And I'll just observe this. This year, you've met about 25% of your regular meetings, and you only meet a couple times a month. So as a citizen, I am unsatisfied with this performance. And part of my reading and cause interpretation of that is a poor unified land use code, which is allowing market rate building. Now, Littleton, the Littleton we inherited, and the reason why a lot of folks moved here is because it had a variety of housing and a variety of neighborhoods. And I'm going to point out to you that the old zoning map intentionally created walkable neighborhoods. There were about 14, identified by those small shopping centers surrounded by multifamily housing, surrounded by modest single-family housing, and then, some pretty nice areas in the middle. Littleton was intentionally planned, and it's small. So they took advantage of that and created a really cool, finely planned city, which is why people moved here and why the input to the comp plan was. We like the quaint character, the small town character, the human scale. And there was no large push to change. I mean, there might have been 10% of the inputs in comp plan to change, but most of them were not. Change everything, and you know what? The ULUC that was passed changed everything. And so you folks don't meet because the market is building what it wants to build. And you know what? That doesn't have environmentally sound buildings for the next 80 years. which is a total failure. You don't build stuff now that's going to last 80 years that is obsolete now and will not work and is hard to retrofit because so much of it is multifamily that doesn't take care of the HVAC systems we need for the future. So right there, the thing is broken. The ULUC is broken. And in addition, we don't have enough affordable housing. So we inherited a city with a really good range of housing, again, very intentionally created, which is being wiped out. And so again, your lack of meetings is not a good thing. We need to revise the ULUC very quickly for these two major failures and more. I did want to say a couple of things about the study session. I do apparently not read it the same way as staff. I'm going to point out that the affordable housing program means that we should take up Geneva Village again. It is affordable housing. It also has historic character, so it adds to the downtown. And we should have a historic mid-century modern overlay district. So that kind of housing with the historic character, the habitat for wildlife and the tree just in downtown, in the parks, we don't need a project downtown. We need Geneva Village again. Thanks very much. I could talk much more.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who did not sign up for public comment who would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to general business, which we have none. We do, however, have public hearings. The first public hearing is PC Resolution 05-2024, approving a site plan for 4752 West Aberdeen Place, a single-family detached residence. We will start with the staff presentation and followed by the applicant presentation.
Great, thank you, Commission. And then I just want to verify, I'm not seeing anything on screen. Are you all seeing staff's presentation?
Nope.
No.
We are not.
All right. Perfect.
There. Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight we are hearing PC Resolution 05-0004. This was noticed as SIP 24-0009. This is a site plan for a single-family detached home at 4752 West Aberdeen Place. Tonight, the applicant is requesting approval of a site plan in order to remove itself from the governing PD. The governing PD, which is Bellflower Estates, does restrict the setback for this parcel to 30 feet, whereas and that is a rear setback, to 30 feet, where the ULUC would permit 20 feet. If approved, the owners plan to construct a pergola. And the decision for this is based on 11 criteria, which are found in 2 different sections of the code, which you can see on screen. And briefly, I just want to go over, this is a very long section, section 10-1-1.2.a.e.2, which states that this allows the Planning Commission to consider an application for a site plan for a single-family residential property to be removed from the PD in order to access the standards and regulations of the underlying zone district. And just to help frame discussion, I wanted to point out that the approval of this site plan would not impact any of the established easements, nor would it dissolve the entirety of the PD or any associated HOA. So for the purposes of tonight's discussion, it is one parcel within the PD that we are discussing having removed from the PD. This property is located at 4752 West Aberdeen Place, which is south of Bulls Avenue and east of Sheridan. It's also located next to two other PDs, the Coventry PD and Hamlet at Columbine. It is a 0.41 acre property, which is zoned MLR-PLO. And as you can see on screen, there's a clip there of the plat. What we are talking about is lot 1 in the far left corner. And then below you can see the setbacks for the PD, which include a front setback of 20 to 25 feet, a rear setback of 20 feet, side setbacks of 5 and 10 feet, side corner setback of 20 feet. And then there are more specific setbacks or more restrictive setbacks for certain parcels. So those parcels that are near Bowles Avenue and Bellflower Drive have a setback of 30 feet. And those that are located adjacent to Hamlet or Hamlet at Columbine or Coventry have a 30 to 35-foot setback where noted. And these setbacks apply to all structures, including accessory structures. And again, per the ULUC, the applicant is requesting removal from the PD in order to access the underlying zone, MLR zone district, which would alleviate the property of those restrictive rear setbacks. And then again on screen here, I just wanted to illustrate the differences between the setbacks. They're nearly a 1-for-1 between the current ULUC and the PD for the MLR zone district, with the exception of that rear setback, which for this for the subject property is 30 feet, where the ULUC would allow 20 feet. And on screen is the site plan that was reviewed by staff. Highlighted in purple, you can see the proposed structure. Nothing has been currently constructed. The yellow line indicates the existing 30-foot setback, and the green indicates the MLR zone district setbacks. Staff found that of the criteria, 6 were not applicable, including the need for adequate facilities, as there is no new development proposed on site. Similarly, the adequate level of service would not be changing. Staff does not find that the, apologies, let me just find that. That as there is no new development on site and the use remains the same, the criteria that states that sufficient protection for adjacent properties against noise, glare, unsightliness, or other objectionable features is not applicable. The access and circulation and parking will also not be changing on site. And again, as there is no new development, the CPTED standards do not apply to this. However, staff did find that this is compatible with the surrounding context and character. Staff also found that if approved, all setbacks and future development on site will be required to conform to the standards established in the ULUC. So staff believes that this has been met. The comp plan does identify this area as suburban residential, which identifies single-family residential for the appropriate character of the area. The removal of the PD from this parcel in order to access that MLR zoning would not conflict with the characterization. Staff believes that this has been met. Staff believes that the design in its location, arrangement, sign, and design of buildings, lighting, signs, landscaping, and buffer yards that conform to the standards of the applicable district is met. Staff also finds that the scale of the proposed use in relation to one another and those on adjacent properties is met. Again, if approved, all setbacks and future development on site would be required to conform to the standards established in the ULUC. Staff also noticed this meeting and the applicant, according to this requirements of the site plan, held 2 virtual meetings. This has been posted on the development activity list. And for the public hearing, we had 121 postcards sent out. There was newspaper notice, as well as notice signs posted on the property. Staff recommends approval of the site plan for 4752 West Aberdeen Place, PC Resolution 05-2024.
All right, thank you. And do we have an applicant presentation this evening?
We do have an applicant. Grant Davis is here representing.
Good evening, everyone.
Apologies, let me get this into full screen. And we have Grant Davis and Russell Johnson representing as the applicant and owner.
Good evening, guys. I'm Grant Davis. I am the Johnson's landscape architect, and appreciate you guys coming here to hear our case tonight. As Andrew's kind of already been through, we're basically just looking to access that underlying zoning code for setbacks. Would love to follow all those rules on that underlying zoning code, but we're just seeking a little bit of relief from that that plan development overlay of the 30-foot setback as noted on that plan. If you want to go to the next plan there, Andrea. As you guys, this was the plan that you guys have already seen before. And yeah, it's just, as previously noted, it shows the 30-foot setback that's currently in place. And then we are looking to access the 20-foot rear setback for the addition of a pergola. So far, we've had all positive feedback from all the neighbors and planning staff as well. And so really just here to say thank you for hearing us, and thanks for your time and consideration in adjusting the zoning requirements for our site. And then this is Russ, as he is the homeowner, so.
Happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
All right, thank you. And at this time, do any members of the Planning Commission have questions for the applicant or staff? Is that a- Oh, is it- I was looking to see who would raise their hand.
This is probably more for the city. Being that this is already in a PD, so I went online and tried to find this myself. I intentionally didn't ask you guys for this because I wanted to see if I could find what the PD said, and I couldn't. Which is, maybe I might just be internet ridiculous and I can't find it. But, yeah, I would have liked to have known that prior to going into this, because we're lifting the entirety of all the PD off and replacing it with this zoning. We aren't doing just this one minor tweak. Is there any other way to do this one minor tweak, like through a variance? I know it doesn't look like we can, because variances are typically done for physical barriers that don't allow you to do something. Is there any other vehicle besides doing this that would allow this to happen?
No, we actually had a robust discussion as staff as well as with the applicant that we don't feel that through a variance this would have been able to be supported, particularly when it comes to hardship. And that really this PD did seem to, this PD was very comprehensive, and that the only way to build to those setbacks would be to the removal of the PD.
Is there an HOA in this area?
There is.
What are their thoughts on this? Is there anyone here from that HOA tonight?
So there is nobody other than me from the HOA tonight. So I serve on the HOA board. It's the Howarth Farm HOA. One member of our architectural design committee came to the public meetings. Ms. Martino expressed support for what we're trying to do, and Andrea explained that this would be in fact a reversion to the underlying zoning, not just a pergola in those meetings. Reaction has been positive. Not received any negative comments from any neighbors, either within the HOA. Spoke over text with my immediate backdoor neighbor or next door neighbor behind the other side of the fence. He was very supportive, kind of a good luck attitude towards it.
Thank you. I might need an explanation as to why this isn't a spot zoning to a certain degree, because you're basically in this cutout of the PD that's there, that you're allowing one residence to play by different rules than everybody else. And I realize that there's a medium lot above it. It technically touches like another medium lot, but I just need a bit of an explanation as to why this isn't considered spot zoning. I think I know why, but I'd like an explanation from the city, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So for instance, the comprehensive plan and the ULUC a lot of the efforts that we've put into the comprehensive plan and the text of the ULUC is getting to that underlying zoning. So we're really focused on getting to that underlying zoning, and we've actually kind of taken out other ways of potentially addressing this PD. We do very minor PD amendments in the code. They're very strict, and they only apply to certain items, right? And so therefore, the code only allows for this site, it only allows the site planning process to get out of a PD for single-family homes. So it's really designed that way. And that's also why staff recommended approval of it, is because it focused on going to that underlying code, which we feel is the right way to move forward into the future.
I would just add that the fact that the city has already gone through and rezoned this parcel and these properties would mean that it's not spot zoning, because it is going to the underlying zoning district. So had we not had an underlying zoning district and we're just looking at this as a standalone, then there probably would be a little bit more thought to that.
Okay, so my understanding is basically the whole thing has been rezoned to medium lot residential. It just happens to be playing by different rules with the PD on top of it?
We have a specific process that we built in specifically for when you don't want to take the entirety of a PD out, and it's really just, in this case, a single-family parcel. There's a specific process that we built into the code to allow for individual SFRs, if you will, to use the underlying zoning district, and that's what this is here for.
Okay, just as far as the decision criteria that we have, there's 3 that are added to the 8 that were there before, and I think the 2 that are most in play here are compatibility, which is the plan is compatible with properties in the immediate vicinity of the subject property, and the zoning district conformance, which is the plan demonstrates compliance with the applicable zoning district and design principles. And I struggle with both of these just because which zoning am I supposed to consider? Is it the PD zoning? Is it the it becomes, it almost becomes a thing where you can, based off of these definitions, I don't know if I would ever be able to approve anything because everything around it is surrounded by this PD. So therefore it automatically is out on compatibility because it's not the same as everything else around it, if that makes sense.
So the one thing I would add on that are most of the parcels in this subdivision only have a 20-foot setback. It's the ones that buffer, or the ones that border onto other subdivisions that have the increased setback. So we felt that was compatible because the rest of the neighborhood had those shortened setbacks, with the exceptions of the ones that were adjacent to those other subdivisions.
Okay, so because it butts up against the other side of the I just kind of lump them all together as the Bellflower ones up there. So because it butts up against another PD, they have to have the 30 foot, but that may not have been the actual intent. They wanted it to get 30 feet off of Bowles originally, or what have you. Is that what
No, it's pretty explicit in the PD. Thank you, Andrea. It's pretty explicit in the PD that from those other 2 subdivisions, the setback increased. So the rear is only 20 for most of the lots, but it's a little tough to read. But do you see where that 1 with the circle is? In the far left-hand lot? Okay, so that's, yep, and then if you go back, so it's that parcel and then the southern parcels that would be, that would have that increased setback. The rest of the parcels internally only have the 20-foot setback.
Okay, do we know why those had the 30-foot setback? Was that just because they were butting up against another neighborhood? And the other side of the neighborhood seems to have the 30-foot. Is that why they match to that?
We think so. We don't really have the historic data on that to show, the rationale for adopting this PD as proposed. I would note, though, that I believe that is Hamlet at Columbine, which is south, is actually no longer zoned MLR PLO. It is just zoned straight MLR. So the standards that would exist for that PD also are no longer in existence.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other members have questions? To my left?
Yes, so there were 120 postcards or so sent out. Was there any feedback other than we might hear from the public tonight? Anything written or any concerns from, say, I would think the most impacted would be the neighbor behind there. Have you had any communications with them or concerns expressed?
So I texted with my neighbor directly behind. He was supportive of the plan, mentioned, we had this meeting and just wanted to see if he had any questions. He didn't. He, again, supportive of what we were trying to do. The meetings themselves, I attended both of them. I think in one of them, the comment we got from one person was, okay, I don't know why we're even here. Once they understood what we were trying to do and we weren't doing something drastic like scraping the lot and adding different kinds of housing. Once we clarified that. So I would also defer to staff's impressions, but I think the meetings were generally supportive of what we're attempting to accomplish.
I would echo that, and for this hearing, I have not received any public feedback regarding this at all.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Just technicality, but I think it was mentioned in the staff presentation that there's a proposed pergola, and in the plan, I think it calls it a shade structure. How would you describe the difference between those two, or are they the same thing?
They are the same thing, yes.
Okay.
It more so comes down to style, wrapper size and all that, so.
All right. That's all I had.
Any questions for staff or the applicant over on this side of the dais?
Just have one. This one's more for staff again, just to clarify then, only lot 1 and it looks like 11, it's so tiny, are the only ones that have, within this whole subdivision, that have a 20-foot setback.
I believe it is, so it would be lot 1, and then the entirety of those lots on the southern side have anywhere between a 30 to 35-foot setback. There are additional setbacks from Bowles and Bellflower Drive that are also restrictive on the PD as well, which would impact different parcels on site, some to the north, and then I believe a couple on the west.
Okay, so any other homeowner, lot owner would need, that had that discrepancy basically would need to go through the same process in order to
Yes,
say-
this process is open for any homeowners that are within a PD that would have restrictions that do not exist in the code.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions for the applicant or for staff, we'll move to the public comment portion of the hearing. Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a public hearing, and I'll open the public comment portion at 6:59 p.m. And I do have sign-in sheets, and we do not have anybody from the public who wishes to comment based on the sign-in sheets. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak regarding this item? I see Ms. Chadbourne has her hand up. Please come forward.
My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here, so I wasn't going to talk because the pergola obviously is a pretty nice use of this space. But Commissioner Radulovich's comments are right on. And what I'm going to say is the old code that we had, which was better than what we have now, would have allowed a waiver for this, and it would have been fine. And it's quite clear to me that if you have 3 different designers in 3 different areas, you do want a little extra setback between those areas. I think that's a good design approach, and I don't think it should have been changed by the poor ULUC and the completely new zoning map. I want that changed. I want us to re-examine that zoning map and take back a lot of what was given in that. I don't think it's progressive. I don't think it's forward-looking. I think it's destructive, and we can't predict what's going on, and it degrades the neighborhoods. Remember in the envision process, It was, what do people want? And it was community character. We want to keep the character of the neighborhood. This specific design doesn't violate that, but a waiver could have been gotten under the old code. We have something called underlying zoning, but that's not underlying, it's new. It took away the old code, it took away our old good design, our great old bones, and put something new under it. It's not underlying, it's new. And it was imposed, and I think it was poorly considered and poorly conceived and poorly communicated and poorly passed. And so this is an example of that. The specific design is fine, but what it reveals about our code and our process now reveals everything bad about it. I also was just kind of appalled by some of the comments that were made. The virtual meetings don't, I'm going to tell you universally, when I've been to public meetings or talked to people who have been at virtual meetings, people hate virtual meetings. They feel that there really is no dialogue, no interaction with the folks presenting the meeting. The folks presenting the meeting have total control, and the people who are coming with concerns really can't get them well expressed. I don't think there would have been a hardship, by the way, under the old code. I think it would have gotten no waiver. So my comments relate to the new code, which created this, and it could have been done as well under the old code, and with the protections that we had in the old code and the great design. So that's my comment. While this probably should be passed by Planning Commission, I think it reveals something else that you should do, which is fix this ULUC. Thanks.
Thank you. I did see someone else raise their hand. Please come forward.
Hello, my name's Sheldon Spiegelman. I own a property over in the neighborhood, and my only knowledge of this is the card that I got. I'm not here to attack anybody or attack the system. Perhaps I'm just looking for more clarification. I mean, it seems to me that, I've been listening to this, not understanding a lot of the terminology, although I've been involved with homeowners associations. So we have a property that wants to put a structure in their backyard, but there's a setback, there's not enough of a setback. So the solution is to remove the property from the homeowners association. I'm not sure I understand that, because if that's the case, then the next person that comes along and says, I don't want to be part of this homeowners association, and can come up with a reason, then we're arguing over why they shouldn't leave. It seems, is there not another solution to allow them to build the structure? I mean, behind their house is a farm. I mean, it's some farmer's piece of property and his house is back there. So naturally, I don't think he cares. And the people on the side don't care. They're not going to be affected by it. And I guess I'm asking for some clarification as to why removing a house from a homeowners association is the solution, because, and I realize this is absurd, what if that particular house decides, well, we're now gonna, paint our house aquamarine and, do all of the things that you have a homeowners association to protect the neighborhood. I mean, that's my comment. I guess I would
Okay.
like somebody to.
Thank you. We will
Perhaps.
collect all of the questions that the public
Okay.
has, and at the end of the public hearing, we'll
Okay.
refer it back to staff and the applicant to respond
Okay.
to
And
what we've
again,
heard.
the other part of it, as I said, is confusing, because what it says is project description, to consider an application for a site plan at 4752 West Aberdeen to remove the subject parcel. I mean, that's it. It doesn't say anything. It has to do with a pergola. It has nothing, doesn't say anything about setbacks. It's just that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak regarding this item? And, yeah, so this is probably a question for the attorney. So we do have either the staff or the applicant could respond to that. Would it be appropriate to close the public hearing and then bring the applicant back up for response? Yes, okay. I'm seeing a nod. So seeing no other members of the audience, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing at 7:06 PM and invite the applicant and/or homeowner back up to respond to the questions, and staff may also be able to offer some clarification on what exactly is being requested tonight.
Commissioners, I wanted to briefly respond to the last comment. We are not, to be clear, we are not seeking to leave our HOA. And that is not my understanding certainly of what we're asking for here. This would access the underlying zoning. We would still be members of the HOA. We would still be subject to paying dues. As a member of the board of the HOA, I'm not trying to leave my HOA. So I just wanted to clarify that point, that that is not the intent of what we're asking for the commission to do today. Thank you.
Thank you. And any clarification from staff?
Yes, I would just expand on that, that this decision tonight doesn't really impact the HOA. The HOAs are not governed by the city and can be adopted, amended outside of any city process, and that this would really just be getting the zoning document, which is the Bellflower Estates, and those restrictions that are set in that zoning document. That would it would just remove this parcel from that and those regulations. Anything that's still in place with the HOA in terms of covenants would remain.
All right. Thank you. And before moving to the part where I call for a motion, are there any additional questions for the applicant or staff? See, nobody raising their hand. So at this point, I would call for a motion in a second.
I move to approve Littleton Planning Commission Resolution 05-2024, which approves a site plan for 4752 West Aberdeen Place, removing the governing plan development in order to utilize the underlying MLR zone district.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Coronato and a second by Commissioner Almond. Any discussion or comments?
First off, I'd like to thank the applicant for actually going through the process and not just building it and hoping it works. That's probably because you actually hired a landscape architect to do this, so I appreciate that, thank you. And I know that these can be long, drawn-out processes just to get something simple done. My house has a flood zone behind it, so you've got nothing. One thing I would like to see cleaned up possibly is the zoning district conformance definition that we have. I think the intent of this is the zoning district conformance for the underlying zoning, not the PD zoning, would be my guess as to what the intent of this was. So I would, just for future reference, we probably need to clean these definitions up just a little bit as far as what's following them, because I'm fairly certain that's what the intent of that was. So, and I think that's all I got.
Any other comments or discussion?
Grant, Russell, thank you for coming and giving us your presentation, staff as well. I feel that staff did a very good job of going through the ways that this adjustment conforms to both compatibility with the underlying zoning and actually conforms both to the PD's sort of formulation of the community as well as the underlying MLR zoning. So it's a bit of a tempest in a teapot, really, and that there's not a huge difference. To me, it's a 9 to 10 foot change of a pergola. So I do agree with the staff sort of conclusions in their analysis that the design and scale and general conformance to the neighborhood and its suburban character are being maintained either way. For me, I feel like one of the best things about the current code structure is that it brings a level of consistency to what we expect in the process. We have a process that's been outlined for single-family homes to remove the underlying PD, and that is potentially very useful for people. And the underlying zoning indicates what the city sort of intends and expects in each of these areas. And that setting of expectations and consistent procedural and process consistency is valuable and good. And this is a very small element of the overall picture, but it's just, I feel like this is operating the way it should be, in a sense. So I am in support of staff's recommendation here. We'll be voting in favor.
Yeah, I support it as well. I think it's interesting, staff has done a good job of preparing us that, you know, this could happen. And that mechanism is in place to remove a PLO overlay to get to the underlying zoning, and it seems to me that that's appropriate. I kind of wonder, though, I mean, the site plan for a single-family residential serves as a basis for removing that overlay, but not necessarily for approving the design. So we could actually see something different than what's shown on that site plan, right? So that's my only concern, but otherwise I support the application.
I agree with what Craig just said, but I'm wondering if we do need to explore a waiver process for this type of discrepancy. And I understand why things are the way they are, because we talked about this in depth during the whole ULUC planning process. And perhaps during that, we could, when we relook at these issues in the ULUC, to at least discuss that possibility, but also maybe look at a way to ensure, and I know that's not really our job, so I don't want to say necessarily ensure, but that what's being proposed is actually what is built. I mean, if it would be anything beyond a pergola or some kind of shade shelter, like, you know, a shed or various things, I don't think that I would feel comfortable with that. But right now, it was just pointed out that we have no control over that whatsoever. So I suppose that's your job then, staff, to make sure that other uses aren't put in. But on the other hand, it could be an allowed use, say a shed or whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying that's a concern. And by the way, I think your illustration and your concept is very lovely. It's a nice job, and it really does meet the intent of this whole process that you're going through tonight. So thank you for that.
All right.
Would you have liked us to address was that a question that you posed to us as well about
Yeah, if you
giving a
can.
little bit more?
You can address it, yes.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it didn't go, unaddressed if that was the
Okay.
intent.
We certainly did discuss that really this could be more than a pergola, and we recognize that. That was also discussed at the neighborhood meetings, to make it clear that this proposal that we're hearing tonight isn't actually the pergola. It is to access those underlying zone districts, and we think that even if this were an addition, the use isn't changing on site, the overall character is not changing, and really the setbacks on site would remain nearly the same with the exception of those rear setbacks. So we did consider anything that might be beyond just an accessory structure in the rear, understanding that if this is approved, the design could change, and we certainly didn't want to base our analysis off of something that is uncertain.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? And I'll just add on to that, and whatever is built on this property would be subject to whatever covenants and restrictions are in place, design requirements from the homeowners association, which, to be clear, is not affected by this action this evening. And with that, I will tell the computer that we are ready to vote.
Should be seeing that here. Hey, Wendy, this isn't, so, it's
gonna pass anyways.
You
It
get to
appears
do
that
a
it worked
thumbs
for
up or
everyone
thumbs
but
down.
Commissioner Neely, so I will call for a thumbs up for a yes vote and a thumbs down for a no vote.
7 in favor, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everyone who came out for that first hearing. The second public hearing we have on the agenda this evening is PC Resolution 06-2024, approval of the preliminary plat for Little Raven Elementary School. And we will start with the staff presentation, followed by the applicant presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jesse Sheets. I'm excited to be here because I've been with the city for 2 years now, and this is my first planning commission meeting, so it's nice to meet everyone. So this evening, this is a proposal to approve a preliminary plat for Little Raven Elementary School, and also includes a right-of-way dedication, and that's why we're before the planning commission. All right-of-way dedications have to come to the planning commission for review and approval. This is the plat for Little Raven Elementary School. The section that we are hoping to remove from the existing plat is a little under half an acre, and it consists of a right-of-way dedication in the middle of West Weaver Avenue, and a replat of the existing lot where the school is located, with additional easements to be added for the final plat process. Little Raven Elementary School was recently reconstructed, and there's a new building in its place. It was formerly known as Moody Elementary. And as you can see, even Google Maps hasn't updated their map yet. That's how new it is. This property is 6.23 acres and located on the northeast corner of South Windermere and West Weaver Avenue. In the comp plan, the school is listed as suburban residential, and the zoning designation where the school is located is medium lot residential, and it's owned by the Arapahoe County School District number 6. This preliminary plat was notified to the public. Postcards were sent to 221 residents within 700 feet of the school. Signs have been posted on the property, and there was a notice in the newspaper with no mineral owners present on site. I wanted to provide some imagery that shows what has taken place at the site, before and afters, to kind of make it easier to grasp the changes that have taken place and where the right-of-way will be located. On the left, you can see an image of the school property before it was demolished and rebuilt. And on the right is an image of the school property from this April, showing the construction of the school practically complete before school opened this fall. And you can see that there was a realignment of the street and a shifting of the parking off of Weaver Street interior to the campus. Showing these above and below, you can see that the parking was located off of Weaver Street before the new school was constructed, and now the parking is located off-site. And one of the great things this did was increase safety for the school, for students, for pickup and drop-off, locating all of those cars interior to the site and off the street. This is the preliminary plat document that was submitted in the dark gray shaded area towards the bottom on the southern side of the site. You can see the right-of-way dedication that's being proposed. And this small sliver of land is located in the middle of the street. So it would not currently be connected to the school. And the purpose for the right-of-way dedication would be so that the city can maintain the street and the streetscape in the right-of-way. I wanted to show this image to kind of remove some of the extraneous data so you can see the affected area at the bottom. And this also has some measurements showing the dimensions of the right-of-way dedication that will be in the middle of West Weaver Avenue. And then just zooming in, getting a closer look so you can see a little bit better how this proposed right-of-way with the preliminary plat approval process is actually located in the middle of the street. And staff is recommending that this preliminary plat be approved in order for the city to maintain this right-of-way for West Weaver Avenue. That's why we're here today, presenting this to the Planning Commission as a preliminary plat with a right-of-way dedication. And if this plat is approved as a preliminary plat, it will be administratively approved afterwards through city staff. Staff found that the plat is consistent with the comp plan and the ULUC, consistent with the zoning district, as this is a public school, and it does meet the Littleton engineering and design standards. Staff is recommending approval of this resolution, PC Resolution 06-2024, that would approve a preliminary plat for the 6.23 acre parcel that would include an acquisition of the public right-of-way. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that presentation. Do we have an applicant presentation?
We do have the applicant here with us, and they would like to speak.
Good evening. My name is Brad Leitner. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Littleton Public Schools. Working through the city on this job when we built Little Raven. If you can go back to the aerial views. Before we built Little Raven, when it was Moody Elementary, you can see that it was a parking lot. So we were doing some snow plowing through the park. You know, we maintain all of our lots, so we would take care of all that. And it was interesting, you know, traffic would have to weave through our parking lot. So we were kind of trying to maintain that for traffic flow as well too. And in doing Little Raven, we were able to move the parking lot, you can see, off of the main street. We feel that the city is much better equipped to do the maintenance on a through street like this, and that is why it's, you know, we are in favor of dedicating this back to the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the Planning Commission for either the applicant or staff? I'll look to my right to see if anyone raises their hand. Certainly.
In the line drawing, which has the details, it's page 38 of the packet from today. I just wanted, I noticed that the new plat line will intersect half of the sidewalk zone of the parking lot, it looks like. Just in that situation, who, is it the city that takes over responsibility for the whole sidewalk, or, no, that's not page 38. It looks kind of like this, very detailed drawing. Do we have that? No? Probably not, okay. Oh, well, hard to describe, but basically the northern line of that gray bar bisects the sidewalk. About 2/3 of the sidewalk is in the city's ownership of the right-of-way in this plat, and then the other few feet is sidewalk in the school's property. Does that mean the school, like, what happens in that situation?
So per the code, the adjacent property owner maintains the
Maintains the
sidewalk,
sidewalk,
whether
okay.
it's in right-of-way or not.
So just the asphalt surfaces are the city's technical responsibility?
Correct.
Okay. So even though that will be owned by this, that sidewalk space is owned by the city, the school district will be,
Yeah, it's very typical that we do the perimeter sidewalks at all of our buildings.
interesting. Okay. That's it. That was my only question.
Okay.
Okay. I'm wondering, why are you coming back now to dedicate a right-of-way? And why didn't it happen sooner? I mean, the school's already built. I'm just curious. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think that's a little more of a staff question, so that's a great question. You know, I've worked on this for a little while, and then Jesse subsequently. This was an item that actually predates all the planning staff. So to be honest with you, I'm not 100% certain why or what the timing was, but we did look at this through an administrative site planning process, and it was identified at some point in time in that process. And there was a lot of discussion previously about whether or not this could have been an administrative plat. And I think that's probably why it held off so long. However, in my review of the code, I came to the conclusion that the code's very specific, that this does require Plan Commission action because any right-of-way dedication is a preliminary plat. So in making that determination, we did go through a few rounds of review of the plat and came to what we feel is a good document, and then have subsequently been working with the school district off and on to bring this before you. So it is a little later, don't disagree with that, but yeah, we wanted to bring it before you this evening.
And I'll echo a lot of the thoughts and comments made by Mr. Chipman. I will tell you, just from my own experience with this project, it's been going on a long time, and for those familiar with Weaver Street, it's an interesting street in the fact that, well, most of that street was really LPS property and not really city property, and so this dedication of a right-of-way cleans up a lot of some of the issues that happen on that little frontage there. I will also tell you, just in terms of the city accepting a dedication of right-of-way, that's something that we probably don't want happening on an administrative side, so that's hence the public process of this.
Thank you. Just a comment real quick on the parking lot. It looks like it's already full. I mean, there's like one space available. And the configuration, the way it comes out, it looks like into the street. I didn't drive down Weaver, which I should have, but I'm familiar with the site other than that. But just an observation, it looks like it's already to capacity.
Yeah, and that's staff parking, staff and visitor parking in there. And then what you see wrapping around there is the queue line for drop-off.
Mm-hmm. I think, I like the design, it's great, it's just interesting. Okay, thank you.
You bet.
It does provide a lot more safety for the pickup and drop-off that didn't exist before on Weaver Street, so.
Yeah.
In theory, if we were to say no to this, the city would not be responsible for the snow removal? That would be all on the school district at that point?
Correct.
Okay. My other question already got asked, so, thank you.
With the city in control of this street now, does the city have the right to restrict parking on that street, on Weaver Street?
In theory, yes.
Okay, just to note that, you know, a clear and uncluttered street near a school provides a lot better visibility. So if the city is able to accept this and then, you know, ensure that doesn't become a parking zone, just to keep it clear and keep it visible for families who are walking or biking to school, I think that would be highly important.
Yeah, just a couple questions for staff here. One is the legal description in Exhibit A does not seem to be complete to me. It doesn't really have any legal description, just describes the size of the parcel that's being dedicated. Is that described correctly in that exhibit?
That's a good question. It's something I'd have to look at a little closer, but we can also do a further examination of that at time of final plat as well.
Yeah, normally a legal description I have is meets and bounds, right? You've got like.
Yeah, you're right. Oftentimes meets and bounds. Sometimes you can do the top line where it's a lot and block description, but oftentimes it's meets and bounds. True.
Okay, yeah, it just looked incomplete to me. As did the staff report on page 4, which was blank. I don't know if that was intentional or just a graphic issue, but, and the other question I have is is there an update on the status of the Littleton Engineering Design Standards? I know we've been told over the last several months, if not years, that was in work.
We've been directed we need to have that finished by the end of the year, so.
All right. Thank you.
Seeing no additional questions for the applicant or staff, we'll open the public comment portion of this public hearing at 7:33 p.m. And nobody had signed up to speak regarding this item. Is there anyone in the audience who did not sign up who would like to speak? Yes, please.
I'm still Pam Chadbourne, who lives a block and a half from here, and thank you for bringing up a couple of things. I actually had noted the comment about the engineering design standards, and we don't have them yet. So thank you for asking about that and getting it on the record that it's supposed to be done by the end of the year. But, you know, I can't comply with them if they don't exist. So I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. It kind of appears that the city must do this. I'm kind of wondering, in the old code, I believe that schools, government property, open space, that was institutional use. We need institutional use back, and that, to me, right away, would have indicated to all of us, even fairly naive people, and I'll say me because it's maybe not totally clear, you know, who should control the streets or take care of streets around there, but if it's institutional, right away, I think all of us can kind of say, should the city be thinking about the street in front of that? Because it's institutional use. Again, government, schools, churches, things where we know people convene, where people come together for purposes, and where there are traffic issues and traffic clearance and stuff like that. So again, I thank you all for bringing that kind of stuff up. And our old code would have done this better. The new code, calling it residential, is absurd. So I also missed the name of Ralph Moody. I'm just going to say Ralph Moody was our Little Britches books. We had a Little Britches rodeo, and I missed the name of Ralph Moody, though I guess I appreciate maybe there was some heritage prior to that that's reflected in this name. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. Any other members of the audience who would like to comment on this item? And seeing none, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing at 7:35 p.m. And I'd call for a motion and a second.
I move to approve Planning Commission Resolution 06-2024, which approves the Little Raven Elementary school preliminary plat.
Motion by Commissioner Allman. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Radulovich. Comments and discussion. I'll start down here.
I'll go. Yeah, I fully support this application. I think it's logical to make that connection through there from transportation planning standpoint, from a school access, as you can tell from the before and after that there's a dramatic improvement in the site planning there and visibility and security for school. The intersection's been improved so that I drive by there every day, and you know, with the hawk signal that's been put up, it's a much safer intersection for children. It's an elementary school. It probably provides better access to the neighborhood as well, although I've never driven back into that area. So I fully support that. I do wish it had come to us, you know, before everything was built, but I'll support it anyway.
I'm not as convinced that this is a great safety intervention. The part of the right-of-way that we're acquiring is actually a much bigger piece of roadway. It used to be a single lane, one-way with no entry in the other direction. So what used to be a very car-limited zone, and you have people walking from the school down to the entrance off the trail there, and now it's a two-lane wide road. It certainly is more accessible for cars, but that doesn't usually correlate to safety for people on foot, kids and people on bikes. So I'm just not as, I don't know if the operations officer wants to tell us whether people are now being directed by the district to come down Cedar Street or the other street, but hopefully down Cedar into that parking lot, yes?
Vehicles?
Yes.
So the
for
vehicles,
the drop-offs.
they come down the East Street, which I believe is Datura.
Datura, see that's the rub, is you now have cars coming down Datura, making a left on Weaver onto this two-lane road, and then a right into the parking lot a block later. So where you have people coming off the trails and stuff on foot or bicycle is also right where that lane, where you have the new route to the parking lot for the drop-offs. It's not a great, I would have moved them to Cedar so that the cars are coming straight into the driveway of the parking lot. And everything to the east is pedestrianized. And this isn't really germane to this question, but we basically are asked to take a much wider roadway with much greater potential for cars, and now actually is an official school district route for the drop-off, Datura left on Weaver into the parking lot, which is not necessarily a great configuration for safety. And we're having a big issue with that in this community about where cars mix with kids on bikes and pedestrians. So that's something I just think should be paid a lot of attention to. And I'm going to hope that by acquiring this wider, bigger roadway by the city, that this will come under the penumbra of some of our ability to intervene in that. I agree with Commissioner Roethlisberger that minimizing parking in there and really taming it more is in the best interest of safety for the school, and possibly even not having cars come down Datura and use this part of Weaver. It's just an extra block where cars are on a roadway. That was my general comment about it. I do think these things should have been clearly plotted out and brought forward in the public process in the earlier stages of the project. And I agree with Sherry that this is kind of surprising to sort of retroactively be approving what's already been built into the street. There's almost no way to say no to this at this point. And in this case, it's probably not a lot of additional snowplow time and asphalt maintenance, but those are real costs for municipalities like Littleton. And in another context, we could be acquiring land on a much more expensive piece of work on the road, and might not want to, but the road, it's all done. It's all built. It's all in the hardscape at this point. So it's not a great process direction. Those are just some of my comments at this point. Thank you for clarifying that, and I hope you'll take some of my comments.
Yeah, and I would like to let you know too, we have staff that is out there as well. And just to kind of finish the loop, we have cars, instead of, we looked at whether we take traffic back up Cedar Street and what we don't do is put them all back onto Windermere, because that is where the majority of kids are crossing up there. So in the morning, we turn them back and go up Cedar Street is how our traffic pattern works right now. But we do provide staff out there.
Any additional comments before we call for a vote? And Commissioner Neely's vote button and microphone are both non-functional this evening, so the vote will have to be a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up is a yes vote on the motion to approve this preliminary plat. Thumbs down is a vote to not approve it. So if you're ready, please vote.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you all. And the next item on the agenda are comments and reports. We'll start with Community Development Director and staff.
Thank you very much. I do have one thing before you this evening. It's in regards to a topic that I know little of. It's actually about the LEDs conversation. My update is that we have someone new joining our team who is going to help us with LEDs. So we have Jessica Stemley, our new Development Engineering Manager, with us this evening. So I just wanted to introduce her.
Oh, thank you and welcome. And next, updates from City Attorney, City Clerk.
There will be no meeting on September 9th, and I will let you know about the meeting on September 23rd.
If there is a meeting on September 23rd, I will be in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that day and will not attend.
I'm going to be somewhere in Italy, so I got you on that one.
No report, thank you.
Any reports or updates from commission members?
Just a quick update to fellow commissioners. I sat on the stakeholder work group as our representative from this body. That's for the missing middle housing group. It's called Neighborhood Housing Opportunities, I believe, led by Zureen. It was a very good 2-hour conversation with a number of architects, engineers, builders, developers, South Metro Housing Options, a couple people. It's in regards to City Council's direction to staff that they want to see missing middle housing availability improved in Littleton, and they want to have a law, basically, an ordinance in January by this. So council was given a number of timeline options, and they wanted the fastest one possible. So there will be a very brief window of public participation and surveys. There's a survey out by the department right now. If you want to look it up, it's on the city's website. I'm sure it's probably been shared with us already, but I can get it to you if you need to. A lot of things are on the table in that conversation. Parking minimums are going to be removed from residential multifamily by law next January in any area within a half mile of a major transit station. We may be discussing that in residential properties in a wider way in this community. There's also duplex, triplex, quadplex discussions about where those are going to be expanded to be legalized. Liberalizing the ADU rules are also changing. The state is going to mandate that we allow them on every single parcel, July 1, 2025. So there's one of the goals is to make sure that our code accommodates that change. And I think there was really a very productive, interesting conversation. It'll be up to staff to sort of pull all of these things together. I don't know if we will, as a commission, be seeing this. The work plan is very accelerated. So we may be talking about that in the study session more. So go ahead, that's it.
No, I really appreciate the report. I think that's a very comprehensive statement. We are working towards scheduling a joint PC City Council meeting in which we would talk about that item specifically with potentially one other item on the agenda. But yes, we do intend to bring back more information for you.
I'd like to add too, if I may, If anyone would like to take the survey, the QR code is located above the water fountain, just outside the door. So if you have about 10 minutes, take a look and offer your input.
Any other commission member?
In the past, the planning commission members have been offered the opportunities to attend local planning conferences and training sessions and so on. And as you may know, the National APA Conference is here next spring, March, I believe it is. And I'm wondering if the city will be supporting anybody that's interested in attending any of those sessions or the conference itself.
It's in Denver?
It's in Denver.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually presenting at it. So.
Oh, fantastic. We could definitely look into extending that offer, so thank you.
Yeah, as far as going to national planning conferences, it would be a relative bargain. But I think we all have lodging locally.
I want the Hyatt.
And just, I think someone mentioned the parking regulations, and Colorado's Department of Local Affairs has a website dedicated to the various housing-related acts that were put into law in the 2024 session. So if you check out their website, there's maps of the areas of different communities throughout the state that are affected by that legislation, including the no minimum parking restrictions for residential areas, which near transit, and I will clarify, near bus lines. There's quite a large number of areas of the Denver metro area that are affected by that. So check out DOLA's website if you're curious about that. All right, any other? All right. So I will then adjourn this meeting at 7:48 p.m. and we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break and resume at a study session at the table over there. first item on the agenda is a legislative update pertaining to the Unified Land Use Code. Turn it over to staff for the presentation.
All right, excellent, thank you very much. Before you this evening, we did want to provide legislative updates. There's about 13 pieces of legislation that we've identified and want to go over at a very high level. So staff is still digging into the particulars of a lot of these items, but one of the main things that we want to talk about and that I want to give you an update on is the main question being, do we believe that this will, an update, I'll go through all 13 of them, but will an update require an update to the ULUC, right? So that's kind of that main premise I'm going to operate off of. So first of all, the agenda, list of impactful House and Senate bills. Items that we feel no action would be needed within the ULUC. Items that text amendments we feel would be required. And then timeline and staff priorities for these updates. So this is the list. I'm going to go through each one of them, but it's just kind of nice to see the representation of how active the state legislation was and how many of them are related to land use. And some other items as well. We cover a couple building things in here too. So the first one, local government renewable energy projects. So this is really talking about working in collaboration with the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, the ECMC, to provide technical support. They're supposed to provide technical support for local governments. The staff took a brief look at this and felt that the ULUC update was probably not required. We already do have a number of green initiatives that are parts of the building codes. We also have some other items in the ULUC. So at this point in time, we do not intend to adopt anything above and beyond that currently. We also, this is oftentimes this focuses on utility scale items, so bigger solar, wind, and frankly, the city just doesn't really have the large tracts of land to accommodate some of those. So, the application submitted, or the city does not have any applications for those items either. We already do issue solar permits, absolutely. You're more than welcome to apply for a permit for solar on your house. We have to also have just a few standalone solar installations as well. Effective implementation, HB 24-1308, effective implementation of affordable housing program. So, this bill clarifies that municipalities may acquire, own, lease housing projects, in addition to current authority to construct a housing project. The bill provides additional option in allowing a municipality to contract with a nonprofit for management. We do not feel that this item would require a ULUC update, predominantly because it's more of a policy item instead of a code item. Feel that we already work with South Metro Housing Options, and that it would be working in conjunction with them through the city manager's office in the future. HB 24-1175, local government's rights to property for affordable housing. The bill creates two property rights for local governments that would attain long-term affordable housing projects. First is the first right of refusal, the other one is the right of first offer. And the local governments may partner with other entities, including assignment of the rights to local housing authority. So once again, we feel that this really kind of piggybacks off the last one, where we already work with South Metro Housing Options. This is something that would be administered predominantly through the city manager's office. That's not to say that we couldn't amp up efforts as well, which we do intend to work very closely with SMHO in the future. SB 24-174, Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance. Local governments must conduct housing needs assessments by December 51st of 26, and thereafter no less than every 6 years. Local governments must adopt housing action plans, and local governments must update master plans and include housing action policy, water supply, et cetera. So once again, we feel that this is a little bit more of a policy item, but at the same time, we also don't necessarily know if it will require an update or not, because we are still monitoring it. It is probable that Dr. Cog will come out with more information, and they may even fulfill those requirements for us since we're in the region. Yeah, as I mentioned, DOLA is still working on creating the methodology. So we might need one in the future. We're going to be monitoring that effort, but as of right now, we did mark this as a no for an update. HB 24-1107, judicial review of local land use decisions. The bill shields local governments from frivolous complaints by requiring court to award attorney fees and prevailing governmental entities, and then related to specific land use matters, residential uses with a net project density of 5 dwelling units per acre or more. We also feel that this item would probably not necessitate a ULUC update. The application of the House bill will occur administratively within the city attorney's office during the course of an pending litigation.
Yeah, I would say nothing changes in terms of the standard of review for a court and looking at land use decisions, but previously in the past, when the city was sued and incurred a lot of money is just in legal fees, obviously it's a concern for developers who are kind of on the fence whether their project is still going to go forward. We would get, a few $100s in filing fees is basically what the return on the city would be, so this just allows for attorney's fees to be recoverable in certain cases. I don't know if it will really have an impact on a lot of litigation, but perhaps we'll give people pause to just file stuff because they don't like something. Depending on the part of the state that you're in, you may see that more often than so that's something that we'll do this. Had to deal with a ton, although we've had a few land use cases in the last few years. So that's
Excellent, thank you. HB 24-1314, modification tax credit preservation and storage structures. So this expands the tax credit for qualified costs incurred by the preservation of storage structures. Will impact approval criteria and reporting as reviewed by the agencies for credit application. So the City of Littleton does work with homeowners, business owners, property owners in regards to tax credits. Those we've had a couple of those in the last few months. They go before Historical Preservation Commission for approval, and then we submit those to the state. So we do not feel that this would necessitate a ULUC update because we already have a section in the code that allows for us to work with homeowners, and those credits get applied to federal and state rebates, not so much local rebates. So yeah, we don't feel that a text amendment would be required.
The hope is that there will just be more available lending for a lot of those folks that are interested in preserving their historic structures.
Yeah, and, as of lately, we've seen some good success with moving those applications forward, so it'd be nice to see even more investment and then therefore tax credits applications. HB 24-1007, prohibited residential occupancy limits. So this item really talks about how many people can live in a single-family dwelling based on family relation. Local governments can't limit that. It's got to be limited by other items such as the fire code. So the fire code allows for a maximum occupancy based on square footage. The ULUC update required? Well, unfortunately, yes. We have one definition that needs to be adjusted minorly. But previously, the city attorney's office has done a great job of removing conflicts with this several years ago. But we did find one that we just need to tweak slightly.
This was kind of the definition of family. And at the time, a lot of local jurisdictions, and some still do, had a definition of family for who could. I think the intent for a lot of these jurisdictions that had this, including the city of Littleton, was this fear that you would have, frat houses, basically, not to say that that's a bad thing. But they wanted to make sure that it was really more, kind of family units that were living there and not kind of wide open to, a bunch of people in a party house type thing. And so we had taken that out, that definitions that we had previously when we adopted the ULUC, but there's probably a couple little tweaks to make, but we do not, despite whatever you had seen in the paper, because I had seen it and I got annoyed, that was like, Littleton prohibits more than one unrelated person from living there. We haven't had that for many years, so.
No, very true. The only item that it references is a little bit in the mobile home, and that's something that we'll bring to you for an adjustment, so.
Yeah, and there is a provision in there that I didn't think that there was a carve out necessarily in the House bill, but it was based upon safety. So we do have a provision in there that relates to registered sex offenders and not wanting to have more than, you would have to be related to live in the same home. We wouldn't want two persons who are sex offenders to be in the same residence. That still remains, and I think just from a safety perspective, there are a lot of thoughts behind that. I know not everyone would agree that this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is right now.
SB 24-005 prohibit landscape practices for water conservation. Prohibits local governments from allowing a non-functional turf, artificial turf, or invasive species on city properties. And then this says new development and redevelopment projects, but I believe that's outside of, I think there's a carve out for single family there. Yep, okay. That it would be allowed for single family, it's apartments, and there's a couple other carve outs too. I think like school athletic fields is a carve out. So there's a few nuances there. However, we do feel that yes, there would be a text amendment here. We'd likely need a new definition for functional turf, and then we'd also need to update 10-1-3.6 because we do talk a little bit about turf and the amount of turf that you can have in a new site plan, et cetera. So.
It's a well-intentioned bill that has some unanticipated consequences. I think it needs probably to be changed a little bit in the legislative session. One at parks, I work for Denver Parks, and we found that the best safety surfacing for playgrounds is synthetic turf, and this bans it. We can't use it anymore, so we have to use the hot rubber, the black rubber that you see on some playgrounds, which is raises the temperature 10 degrees hotter than the surroundings. So hopefully that will change in the session.
Craig, what is the purpose of this? I mean, I don't quite.
Non-functional turf is like the areas between the sidewalk and the curb, right, along a street where now this bluegrass turf that's irrigated. So what they're trying to get is developers to design in a zero-escape approach to reduce water use. It exempts single-family residents. It only applies to city property or municipal property, I guess, and commercial or multifamily. HOAs.
Institutional, HOAs.
Yeah. Medians.
Yeah. So,
And
the way it's written, it seems backward from what you're saying. How this is written to me doesn't make sense. It prohibits local government from allowing, so.
Right.
Yeah, approving we wouldn't be able to sign off on the installation and planning or placement of those types of.
All right, a non-functional turf area would be, a functional turf area would be someplace like an athletic field. It has a function, right?
Okay.
yeah, I apologize for the the terminology. Oftentimes, and I don't know the full story behind all the conversations that the legislation had, but oftentimes, it's looked at from a microplastics perspective. So yeah, that potential for degradation and runoff.
Urban heat island is one thing the state built.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as we're going through here, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I said, okay.
I can
I
go
was
back.
I was gonna say that my office goes through every House bill and Senate bill that's introduced, so, for the 2024 session, we're talking over 700 bills were introduced. And they're all introduced at different times. There's a deadline, but no one ever hits the deadline, so we'll get like 50 bills that are introduced afterwards. Not all of those are applicable to cities, so we kind of weed things out as we go through. One of the challenges becomes, as it gets closer towards the end of the legislative session in May, is you'll start seeing a bunch of amendments. So you've read through, however many pages of nonsense, and then they change the nonsense and you have to reread it. So it's a huge challenge to try to keep up with all the changes. And then there's a bunch of compromises that are happening as these things go through, and they're trying to make sure that they can get their bill, whatever their pet project is that they sponsored, passed. And so then they agree to some concessions, and then not everything is fully thought through. And so that's one of the challenges as we, pass these things, and the time it takes from when these are passed, introduced, signed by the governor, assuming he signs them, until now, here we are, 4 months later, and we're still trying to figure out exactly how this is gonna affect various areas of our code, because a lot of things you may not think would have any effect, and then as we go a little bit further down the line, we find out that, that actually does have an impact, so.
Do we have a definition of what turf is here? Like full stop, cause as opposed to some kind of xeric or native grass in these spaces as opposed to,
I believe the bill
Water,
does have a
bluegrass.
description of that
Okay.
there's non-native types of grasses, like bluegrass, zoysia grass, there's a number of
Just-
different types.
just
but,
wondering
yeah.
as much as anything.
And our code does attempt to restrict new bluegrass being installed. Yeah, we allow it in certain percentages, but we do promote other turf or xeriscaping or some other form of surfacing.
There's a lot of definitions in the bills themselves.
Right, yeah. HB 241173, bill mandates that local governments do one of the following. Adopt ordinance and incorporating some provisions in the model EV charger permitting code to be created by the Colorado Energy Office. So something that, we would be waiting on seeing. 2, adopt an ordinance establishing internal permitting process, which we have. Or adopt an ordinance that local governments will not adopt the above 2 options, Anyway, regardless, we do feel that there's a text amendment needed, but the great thing is we already have a process. EV charging stations are permitted, we permit them actually quite frequently through an administrative approval process by the chief building official under section, yada, yada, yada. The city staff, we might look to make some tweaks to this. Currently, the Class 3 EV charger has a more stringent requirement than the Class 1 and Class 2, or the Level 1, Level 2. And a lot of the permit applications that we get are from the car dealers. And they want the Level 3 chargers, right? It makes sense. They're utilizing those vehicles quite frequently. They're just far superior in charging time frame. So we might look to making Level 3 chargers easier to permit. So that would be our update there. HB 24.
I could just jump in again.
Yep.
One of the things that I think we still need to reconcile with the building department on the EV charging is when we adopted the Energy Conservation Code,
it also came with requirements that new builds for residential had to become equipped to have the ability to go with electrical charging. So we'll have to make sure that that kind of lines up correctly.
Yep, absolutely. So, that newer building code does require basically a level 2. So basically a drier, 220, for lack of a better term, connection in the garage. So, yeah. And, we do have a number of new structures, new homes, attached or detached coming here in the near future. So they'll be looking at being upheld to that standard. EV charging, HB 24-1161, motor vehicle access, individuals with disabilities, EV charging stations constructed or replaced after January 1st of 26. At least 5% or one vehicle station should incorporate standards for the U.S. Access Board until federal regulations are issued. We do feel that this would require a ULUC update. Staff will review and include necessary updates within the vehicular standards update. I believe this is trying to make for larger, at least a larger parking space where it's accessible to have that charger versus having them at narrow locations. So that's, something that.
Yeah, a lot of the EV charging sites, because they were designed, at least at the time, for what you would think of would be the smaller car, the Prius, that would pull in there. Obviously with the Rivians and Cybertrucks and the Fords, a lot larger, needing a little bit more space. One thing, and I'm just throwing it out there because Jared and I have obviously not met on this yet. We do have a requirement for certain developments coming into the city to have EV charging stations, but I don't think we have any sort of ratio in terms of how many they should provide. I think we require at least one, but
It's one of the incentives, isn't it?
Precisely. It's one of the incentives. You can get a incentive to, maybe go higher or more density if you select several of the sustainability incentives, and that is definitely one of them. It requires EV chargers at a higher percentage. When it comes to, if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to residential, multifamily residential, there's a requirement. I don't believe that there's a requirement on certain zone districts such as industrial or that business center. So there's some holes there that we may want to look to fill as well. HB 24-1304, minimum parking requirements. So this really looks towards local governments may enact or enforce parking minimums for bicycle parking, affordable housing projects. This applies to affordable housing projects with 20 or more units, affordable housing agreements with parking incentives. This definitely would require an update. We do feel that our new code has a lot of good things in it. For instance, it has parking maximums, and that's one of the items that that this bill references. Is they want parking maximums. They want to remove a lot of parking minimums. It wants to provide minimums for bicycle parking, so allow for or promote additional bike parking spaces there. Yeah, so potential sections will be updated, 10.137, which is our parking, which allows for parking reductions in the downtown. 10.958 need to be analyzed to reduce incentives as it relates to some of our adaptive reuse items, because right now you can change a location as adaptive reuse without really any parking changes in that. It can be a 1-for-1.
Yeah, so the thought behind this House bill was really it's usually couched in affordability. It only applies, not only is there kind of a list of criteria that it applies to, but it also has to be near either rail or bus stations. So Littleton, a lot of some of these properties would be located on Broadway or Santa Fe or along the light rail station. So it applies to a pretty large section within our city in terms of removing the parking minimums. And the thought has been, or was, when this was advanced, was we're spending a lot of money on building parking when we could be using this space to build homes. And this is a way to, at least in their minds, to increase density not only to support the mass transit that we have within our cities, but also a way to, in some level, affect affordability. And so that's how this was pushed through. And we'll see.
Does this affect our affordable housing ordinance at all?
So with,
I think one of the carrots that's angled to do the affordable housing is that the minimum starts to deplete. So if there's
Sure.
no minimum, then there's no need to have that incentive in there because no one's going to take it.
that was some of the comments that were made. And so, just from a local perspective, what we saw last year and what we saw this year was the state coming in and adopting these land use controls, which is something that has typically been and has been afforded to local governments to decide how their cities should be zoned, function. And this has been the attempt, this is a result of that attempt to get involved in that. It was met with a lot of opposition from municipalities, not as much as last year. Last year, what they did is they just threw the kitchen sink into one bill and it failed. And so this year, they separated the kitchen sink into different pieces and they passed one by one by one. One of the points of opposition that was heard is a lot of people had developed those incentives. Hey, we'll reduce the amount of parking that you need if you can provide us with some affordable housing components. And so this kind of took away part of that carrot that was available. And so now what you're looking at in terms of what a developer would meaningfully want for, it's like, okay, well, we've reduced the footprint because you're required to reduce that footprint, i.e. where the parking would be. Now we're left with height. We're left with maybe some reduced kind of green space areas. And so it's it doesn't obviate our own need to come up with our incentive policies for inclusionary housing, but it certainly requires us to take another look to see what, if anything, we can do to help, kind of address that issue. Because one of the carrots is gone now.
Very true. Well, we also have a requirement that they provide, any large development must provide 5% of the units mix as some AMI reduced level median. We require, that's just a requirement. So I think the thinking is, if let's say parking takes up 16% of a structure, and you're no longer forced to build that. My take on this is a little bit different than yours, is that these costly parking mandates have been removed from being required in developments. And the premise, as I understand it, is that municipalities like our zoning code are in no position to know what specific needs of a building are. The woman, Kate Epley from Habitat, was at the meeting today, and she's like, we don't build a lot of parking in our structures. Habitat families don't often want a parking space. They're at that level of income that they would prefer to have more room for the kids, an extra bedroom, et cetera. And so those were stumbling blocks for some affordable housing developers to even get off the table. Like they couldn't make projects pencil out when they had to build garages and things that their tenants didn't want. So it's also a way to incentivize just a larger number of units in the same envelope. And when we require, as we do in Littleton, 5%, if you get an extra 20 units, that's going to be, another unit of housing. So there's a way that we don't maybe need to incentivize. I think that this rule in general is beginning of this process saying the market, the customers of a place, the people who are going to buy it are the ones that will drive the decision process, the developers. And I'm not a big fan of maximums either. I think we want to let people who build things, they know, a restaurant knows how many parking spaces they want. Say you just want to open a cafe, you don't want to have any you're a neighborhood like we do in downtown, you can make that call. And this is yet to apply to cafes and things like that, but the idea is that municipalities in some long, big table of mandated parking limits is just an arbitrary set of rules. And they're beginning to remove that in this particular zone, but it's probably gonna ultimately be a larger zone of removal of our say in parking requirements. Because they're
Yeah.
costly. They add cost to buildings. And that adds cost to housing specifically, and that's why this is here.
And that's exactly what the developers would tell you, that, I mean, they're in a better position to know their market than anyone else. They obviously
They live or die by making these successful
they're
projects.
probably
If
going
it's
to
unsuccessful, they're gonna keep it.
sell or rent less units if they don't have parking.
Right, some of
In
them will
theory,
need
for
it.
those that
Mhm.
want parking.
Right. Seattle's done this for a while, and it's been okay. Like, almost every major project builds parking. It's just that they weren't required to by some table in the zoning map, in the zoning code. I think what might be useful for us here is in addition to the ULUC update, we might want to have the map updated so that it's clear which parcels are affected by that in the zoning map.
It's gonna be quite a few, I would think.
We're still waiting on not Dr. Cog, is it DOLA? I think it's DOLA. DOLA is supposed to be releasing some mapping that,
Right.
I wanna say it's in a couple weeks.
Well, and maybe the chair
Map
reference.
is live.
Is it live?
Is it
Yep,
live now?
for the parking,
Okay.
yeah.
So that
Includes
was news to
Littleton.
me. I had not heard that it was live.
And Colorado Springs.
So that'll show us what part of our future land use map and zoning map would be affected by this law. And that might be something we want to also include or roll out in the update so that people looking at development in those parcels know what's going to come under parking mandates or not. They've been removed.
For me, just personally, while I don't really like mandates, just my own personal opinion, I will take kind of, I don't think the developers are advocating for this for any altruistic reasons, so I just throw that out there. So whenever they come forward with, hey, this is a way that it's gonna solve all these problems, it's like,
Yeah.
what are you getting out of
For
this?
some reason you don't believe them? Gee, shocking.
More skeptical.
Imagine if we had residential wine cooler mandates. You know, everybody loves a wine cooler. But
No, they
it's,
don't.
it's something not every family needs or wants. We don't have residential wine cooler mandates.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of,
We could.
actually, when you look at
I'm
Gen
not-
Z, there's really not the love affair with cars that kind of went away with, I feel like Gen X was probably the last, right, with this love affair with cars. And actually, there's a lot of people who don't like cars and would rather live somewhere smaller, more dense, and be one car households because they're expensive. I mean, that's the other thing. You look at the cost of cars anymore too, and how much it costs to buy and maintain a car. There's a lot of people who just, they don't have that budget.
Yeah.
And so to live somewhere that's more accessible and to be able to be a one car family household instead of a 2 or 3 car family household, that changes who's gonna rent those spaces too. And it could make it much more attractive to a younger population that just doesn't have the money or the desire to have multiple cars.
And I think I'm with Reed and you,
Yeah.
it's mandates in general.
Yeah.
The idea that we should be mandating a lot of things, especially costly
Agreed.
things like
You know,
parking.
one of the challenges that we run into, so Cherry Cricket would be an example, Littleton Brewing may be an example of when we start having that parking for those people that are using cars start spilling out into the neighborhoods, which, you know, in front of their house, they were used to being able to see the street, and now they see a car there, and so
No, these things
sometimes
are,
that shows success for a business, things that we should all want to a certain level, but then there's
these
that.
things are all interrelated to one another because it's, you allow someone to have less parking to increase affordability. Our street structure is from the 1950s, and I know there's push to get basically bicycle lanes everywhere. At what point is it basically you just, it's an assault on an assault's probably a bad word. It is basically the taking away of the vehicle by force to a certain degree, is what it is, because of all the mandates that happen. That's kind of the way that, you can make an argument for it, and one of the things I will say is, why do people move here? They move here because of the mountains, a lot of times. You ain't getting there on a train. You're just not.
No, but you don't have a right to store your public property on city streets either. That's at the end of the day, the city street is for movement, and if we need to look at something like, paid permits, right, you know, like you could get a paid permit for a resident, you know, for one vehicle, it's $50 a year. If you want it for two vehicles, first one's $50, second one's $500, right? How much space on the street do you wanna take up? What is that worth to the city? Because the city pays to maintain those streets. And there's no reason to say that, oh, you know, well, it's okay, you've always parked on the street in front of your house, so
But the-
therefore
the
that's your
alternate to-
space.
What I'm saying is that we're reducing the amount of parking that they're gonna allow on their private property. So where are they going to go?
You can put as
Dan,
much,
let's be
you
clear,
can put
we're
as
not-
much,
we're
you can
not-
put as much parking on your
Changing
private
the
property
parking
as you
mandates
want.
doesn't reduce, developers are still free, and in cities where they have removed these, they build a lot of parking still. It's not, we're not removing anything, we're just no longer mandating a certain level.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be up to developers to make those decisions, and that's, I think that's rightly where it should be ultimately.
Agreed.
Then we can have a very far-ranging conversation here about this, I don't
Yeah,
wanna.
yeah, I know. We probably just need to get moving. That's fine.
And to be honest, we're parking.
No, it's an interesting discussion.
in-depth conversation about this, so, yeah.
And there's, I think the question for the city is, so do we just take this particular piece of legislation and enact what the state is directing us to do, or do we look at parking in a larger sense? You know, cause this only affects multifamily housing. Do we look at parking standards for the downtown zone district? Do we need parking minimums for any uses downtown? Do we want to look at parking management things, which I think someone brought up? Yeah, Cherry Cricket is clearly having an impact on that nearby street. So what about metered parking? And if you're a resident, you get one metered parking.
I will tell you.
Meter parking can be paid parking can be successful, but the revenue needs to stay local. That revenue needs to stay local in that district to improve sidewalks, to improve the infrastructure in those neighborhoods, to benefit the people directly, not just, I mean, that's a proven method for implementing and supporting paid parking in areas where parking is in demand, right? There's no reason parking on the street shouldn't be treated at a market rate. It's land. Land has value. Even if it's a street, that street space has value to park there, right? Like if it didn't have value, right? Like you could extend their driveway 10 feet into the street, but maybe, anyway.
It's gonna be
Great.
a very
Digress.
involved and
Yeah,
interesting.
get
great
into this more.
discussion sponsored by Donald Shoup, the author of The High Cost of Free Parking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometime.
Guilty, sorry.
Moving on to accessory dwelling units.
Yes. HB 241152 accessory dwelling units. So, this item, pretty much mandates that or indicates that ADUs, will be, required to be required to have administrative approval for an ADU on, on any single-family detached dwelling units, parcel. So currently, we have a lot of ADU regulations. We have some really good ones, but we also have some holes in where they're allowed, right? It was focused on those, alleys. So this, is something that we've talked about here in Plan Commission, also at City Council level, in a desire to make the changes to the code that would allow detached, and we're predominantly talking about detached ADUs, right? Because we do allow for the contained, aka basement for the most part, and then the addition, so, attached to the addition. So this is predominantly discussing those detached ADUs. This is something that we're proposing to, we were planning on tackling this anyway through the neighborhood housing opportunities that, Commissioner Santana referenced the meeting earlier, that we will have a lot more information on. So this update we foresee coming before Planning Commission in, say, December-ish timeframe, maybe November, December timeframe.
And so there's, the compliance date, as referenced earlier, was June 30th, 2025. You know, outside of the preemption issue, which I talked about, I don't like when state government tells local government what they can and can't have in terms of their land use policies. But one of the things that this also did is for those that live in an HOA that may have their own restrictive covenants, CC&Rs, bylaws, whatever you wanna call them, that says, hey, we don't do duplexes here. This Senate or House bill overrides that. So even if you have an HOA that says you can't have this, you now can. So those in HOAs, I don't know.
Is it retroactive? I don't recall from the legislation.
It would be.
Okay.
What'd you say, Jason?
Was it
Well-
retroactive?
Oh,
Does it apply to
retroactive,
those
okay.
CCRs that were established before the bill was enacted?
So that's something
Okay.
to.
I thought one of the other interesting things about 1152 is at the last minute, it was amended to, they removed the owner occupancy requirement in exchange, and they changed that at the very last minute. Because a lot of states have an owner occupancy requirement on the parcel to build an ADU. That was traded in exchange for a block on developers, so big developers cannot build these things, they have to be built by the person who owns the property. That was the trade that was made by the authors of the bill. I don't know if our code needs to specify that, but I don't know if we actually mention occupancy rules in our ULUC, but we'll maybe make sure Zareen looks at that, because that would be something we want to make sure we conform to the way the bill was actually amended at the last minute.
I know we do that with STRs.
Yeah, one thing that they left in was it would still apply to STR, so this wouldn't be a way to, you know, build an ADU, because currently right now, we talk about primary, that it wouldn't be a way to suddenly start doing STRs by adding ADUs.
STRs are short-term rentals.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, precise. But yes, we currently do have that restriction that you, with a few that are not conforming, that we are allowed, but short-term rentals with that non-conforming exception would have to be owner occupied, so.
Yeah, we had those with short-term rentals in the city prior to the city actually adopting a formal short-term rental ordinance, and we grandfathered in some of the cities that weren't, some of the properties that weren't owner occupied.
Yeah, there is a sunset on that too in the code, so,
On which one?
on the non-conforming short-term rentals. So, that'll be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about that in the future. HB 24-1313, housing in transit-oriented communities. This is partially what we were talking about before, when it's those transit areas. DOLA, it sounds like, just came out with a map here recently. We knew, of course, that the two light rail stations in Wilton would definitely be transit oriented centers or communities. So those two locations, but we believed that the O line, the bus line that runs along Broadway, would also fall into that category. Well, we think that I see a head shaking no, and that's why we need to wait for DOLA.
Right.
So yes,
I checked the DOLA maps for Littleton because I was curious. They published draft maps.
Okay.
The bus rapid transit for the mandatory does not extend all the way into Littleton, but there may be optional. So communities are allowed to have optional transit centers, which can count towards achieving the housing opportunity goal, but are not calculated as part of that housing opportunity goal. So we don't get penalized for those areas, but we can use those areas have a look at the maps once.
Okay, yeah, well, we did a bit of assuming,
Yeah.
because we did understand that there may be a possibility in the future of the bus rapid transit. And so even if we don't, was going to say comply, but if we don't qualify now, we may in the future, it kind of depends. So that's one of the reasons why we are kind of planning for the Broadway to be most likely included in the future. Sounds like as of right now, it's not. Excuse me. So this one, we assumed we would need a code update to. However, we did want to wait until more information from DOLA. Sounds like that might be kind of hot off the press, so I apologize for my old information here.
I didn't think it would be until September. And so when we're talking about, I guess to dumb it down so that I can understand it, when we're talking about a housing opportunity goal, essentially this is some mathematical equation that arrives at basically density. So the whole idea behind this bill is to increase density, allow for density, I guess is probably a better term, in and around our major transportation centers. So whether or not that's places, I wanna say it's quarter mile of bus and train, if assuming that your bus route is every 30 minutes. So the way that RTD moves things, something you could qualify and then they just reduce the schedule or eliminate it and then it's gone. That's been, and so when we've taken a look at kind of what the numbers would be, you know, I will tell you that based upon the fact that the city already rezoned a lot of our properties as it is, we don't have a lot of those kind of, there are some on Broadway, but we don't really have single family that along a lot of our major bus corridors. And so the changes that the city would ultimately need to make in terms of increasing allowable density, I don't think are gonna be that great. We're actually really not that far off, at least in our preliminary calculations of, oh my gosh, does this mean we're gonna have to go to like 1 million dwelling units per acre? We're really not that far off.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
the bill only mandates 16 units an acre as the median density of the quarter mile, right?
Wow, that's.
We have zone parcels that are 60 and 80 units an acre on some of these. So
Absolutely.
you could have 0 over here and probably still make it. So
So
it's not a super high bar to reach, and I think you're right, we've done, if it's 30-minute headways on buses, then even Littleton Boulevard will qualify. The 66 runs twice an hour. So we'll have to look at these maps. The question for me on this is really like, we have neighborhood commercial zone districts along places like Littleton Boulevard. And one of the things that's really tricky is that we may have a neighborhood commercial parcel that technically allows 40 units an acre or something, whatever our NC does. But it's butting up against single-family homes on the next end parcel. And because of the way that we have setbacks and constraints to that proximity and that transition, can you actually meaningfully build 40 units on that parcel? I don't, you know, there's a way, I think there's gonna have to be a reckoning at some point in this bill where you might have this parcel says you can build 80 units, but realistically, with other elements of your code, you can't. And so those are sort of artificial numbers in these parcels. I don't know, it's one of those technical questions. It'd be nice if we looked at it and understood it better.
I mean, right now, you just have to allow, and it doesn't necessarily need to be built, but as I'm
Feasible,
thinking about
it's
Broadway,
allowed, but is it feasible?
you know, I'm looking at those car dealerships and, you know, right behind there is, you know, with the transitional housing, if you will, that transitional zone that we have a lot along Broadway.
Yeah, those areas are gonna use it. But I think almost every one of those car dealerships I've looked at are CM or neighborhood commercial. I mean, they're already zoned for major potential residential use. They just
Absolutely.
those dealerships don't want to sell them and turn that in, redevelop them, so. But I think you're right, I think they've already achieved the zoning requirements according to.
What is a CM? Isn't it like 26 or something?
CM is allowed up to 80 units, 81 units with sustainability bonus.
With bonuses, yeah.
And so with that bill, the densities actually went down through compromises. So it started off as you need to have a density of like 1 billion, and then it ultimately got to like 40 for a long time. And I don't know if it ended at 16 or if it's still at 40.
20 or
It's at
16,
40.
it's pretty
40
low.
for the goal. Yeah, 40.
Our maximum, our maximum density with bonus is 62 units an acre in CM. And it's 52 without those sustainability bonuses or other
So we need
bonuses.
some sixties.
We hit the 80 on that one because it was considered one parcel and they stuck everything on one side.
Oh, right.
That's what it was.
It's like air rights.
So
Yeah.
I would offer that had we not rezoned those locations to CM and it was, you know, B1 and B2, we might be having a different conversation in
Yes, I
terms of
think you're right.
100%.
where we would potentially be seeing impacts or how those parcels may be rezoned in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Our code is much more allowable for those mix of uses or even residential uses by right in NC or CM.
I did have one question, didn't see this on the list, but is the city planning to do anything with Proposition 122 natural medicine? The state will be issuing licenses for natural medicine healing centers starting January 1st, 2025.
Is it a mushroom center, is that what that is?
Yes, psilocybin.
That's a great question. It's,
I don't even know if we have that category in our definition.
I don't think so.
Natural healing center? I know we have,
And natural
pot store
medicine.
dispensaries in our category.
Yeah, and I can't remember if that's a
We might need
standalone
to add that
category or if
category
that's
to
a.
our
Yeah,
list of definitions of building types and put it in the table.
So that medicinal purpose is licensed by the state, similar to how they would do marijuana.
yeah, and unlike Amendment 64, communities cannot prohibit those types of businesses and and per the enabling legislation, the bill from 2023, communities cannot enact overly restrictive regulations on natural medicine healing centers. I suspect we may get business license inquiries in the near future.
Does that include really high taxes?
Quite possibly.
Like sales taxes?
So,
Like we do with marijuana?
Well, they,
It's 122?
Proposition 122.
is that going to,
We can.
it doesn't encompass marijuana, does it?
No, it does not. It's natural medicine healing centers where a state licensed facilitator administers the medicine to patients at the facility.
A
Tends
great
to,
deal of the revenue will not be a physical object sale, it'll be services, so it's
Yeah.
not like marijuana. in the
yeah,
sense that
no
yeah, that's
retail
true.
sales.
Most of it's the healing person's role, it's like going to Masseur and getting a tiny bit of psilocybin. That's probably $15 out of the $200 package.
Yeah.
It's gonna be,
It's gonna be
it's not gonna be a cash cow for sales
It's like a
tax.
methadone clinic for a natural methadone clinic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But who knows what
right.
we want?
An add-on to
Maybe.
counseling services that are otherwise offered there, I don't.
And we've seen a lot of things around sober living centers, things like that, trying to come through into the city. I know that we have kind of a catch-all as it relates to medical within our code that we try to apply those to in terms of locations and where they fit, so I'm not,
Maybe that would work for this. It's just a medical
Potentially,
services.
something we'll definitely have to look into closer.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, it's just something, I have some draft legislation I can send you from my day job email address.
Sounds great. We're always
Good.
happy to share
Thank you, Brad.
information. So, yeah. No, thank you for the update.
Nothing wrong with that.
Cut and paste.
The next item that I kind of wanted to talk about is our tentative timeline. So I'm hoping that, you know, if you recall, we did utilize something similar to this, a similar graphic at the beginning of the year. And so I'm really trying to work on a similar structure so that we get a little bit more familiar with it. You know, for instance, the neighborhood housing opportunities was something that was proposed back, you know, based off of work that the Plan Commission did with a task force. So, housing task force. So, you know, that is being brought forward. We did take a strategic pause on making those updates until the legislative items were completed. And now we're moving full speed ahead on those text amendments. We're also working on smaller items such as plating, which was discussed, master sign plan, just something that's new that we're having a consultant look at briefly. And then the 3 Mile Plan, which was something that we also intended to update as well. So we're hoping to do all of those throughout the course of, 2024, maybe spilling over slightly on, especially the neighborhood housing opportunities into 2025. And then we would propose working on these, we'd get through this slate of ULUC updates in 2024, and then we would look to start a new cycle of legislative, or of ULUC updates based on those other legislative items that we discussed this evening that require updates just due to capacity and bandwidth. Splitting those out into 2 different updates we felt was important. A lot of those legislative items go into effect in July, late June, July of 25. So that's why we'd be looking to do first and second quarter of 2025 update there. We also see a lot of those as being less interactive than the neighborhood housing opportunities. We need a lot of public input for the neighborhood housing opportunities. After that, talking about some updates to some of our design standards there in the code. Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan, we are moving full speed ahead on that. Just an update for you. Excuse me. Previously, back in May, we talked about getting input on scoping from the Plan Commission on Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. We've taken those comments, and then we went to the City Council shortly thereafter and discussed timeline, discussed budgeting of it, and it was agreed at City Council that we would make a full budget request for 2025 rather than trying to potentially break up into different phases this plan. So City Council did approve that effort, and now we're working through the budgeting cycle and at the same time drafting our RFP. So as soon as we know that we have what our budget looks like, we'll go out for RFP and work on bringing that consultant on board and working through through that planning effort.
You expect to have the RFP out this fall for a start Q1 2025?
Yeah, our preference would be, as soon as we get that green light, we've got our document ready to post, right? So that's our goal. We're closing in on finalizing that draft. So I know everybody.
Did the council give you an approved budget for the consultant hire, like for the RFP?
Not as of yet. So initially, this was an item that was kind of reprioritized at the beginning of this last year, and we didn't really have a budget for it because it wasn't contemplated going in, starting in '24. So we have kind of put just a bit of a strategic pause to be able to write a more comprehensive RFP and to understand what kind of funding we will have for a full project. So that's what we're working.
Sorry, did I miss what the color code is here?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We had this color coding on our prior, and it was items that needed a lot of, so the orange is items that need a lot of public engagement. Have a very robust process, so the stakeholder group, the survey, joint meetings, putting out draft language for input on, et cetera. The yellow items are items that we feel are more technical in nature and can probably move through the process in a more streamlined approach. And then the green is kind of middle of the road, where you would still need some of that public interaction and get more robust feedback, but not to the level that the orange is.
The design standards in 2025, that relates to what? Design of the buildings?
There's some design standards there's quite a few design standards throughout the ULUC. And so that would be trying to clean up discrepancies that we found in those design standards that would make it easier for us to administer.
Is that just conflicts?
It's mostly conflicts or something that we don't think quite has worked the way it was intended. There's like kind of a double tiering of certain things where maybe a single would work. It's that cleanup language is what we're thinking.
One of the things that I bantered or myself just thought about is is it 3 environmental standards gets people an incentive on density? If I remember right.
I'll double check.
It's
I
3 or
thought
5, I can't remember. It's
because there's like A's and B's, and so it's like
yeah, it
3
depends on
A's
A's and
and
B's. Yeah, it's
3 B's, yeah, somewhere in there.
I don't know if we need to talk about having a further discussion on that, because it would be nice to see more future-proofed buildings that have better EV stations, whatever we're thinking of here.
I don't disagree, because some of our sustainability bonuses are now mandated by like building code. So
Yeah.
is that really a
Yeah,
bonus?
it's not really a bonus,
right?
but, so
Yeah.
it just, the more of them you have, the more, you dangle a carrot, right? The more of them you have, the more density you can pack on, sort of deal.
2 A's and 4 B's.
So it's either, or any combination thereof, or like an A and 2 B's or something like
No,
that,
I
or?
think I
is
think
it
you
one or
have
the
to
other?
have a minimum of 2 A's and 4 B's. You can go above it, but
God, I felt like I was only seeing like 3 or 4 in some of them.
there are smaller numbers. Allowable signage is 1 A and 3 B's. So there are some that are less. Open spaces, 3
It
and
just,
3.
to me, it feels like a revisiting of that might be somewhat warranted, just to sort of get better buildings in exchange for more density, I suppose. I know it's sort of a strong arm way to do it, but it's
an option, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe a discussion with our environmental board would be a good thing, to see if they have any newer ideas as far as what we should be requiring. That'd be a bad idea.
Completely agree. We've kind of looked at some of those too and have had very similar thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
No, appreciate it, absolutely. UOUC and building code alignment, that's kind of one of those that could fall into that category. Following at Littleton Boulevard, we would like to work more on an HP plan, future land use and character map, updates, maybe a little bit of error correction there. 27 vehicular mobility, working more on, even more on parking standards, et cetera, beyond what the state has indicated. And then sustainable landscaping also. So some of these have come up more recently, and we'd really like to push them up and push them forward. Right now, it's been a challenge on staff, et cetera. So if we get the opportunity to move a couple of those items earlier, we'd be happy to do that. But this is right now us trying to be a little more real on our staff timing.
And I will say that Public Works is also trying to set up some of their own studies and updates in terms of their master plan update. There are some corridor studies, specific key intersections that they'll also be coming forward in 2025 that should help in the efforts when community development is taking a look at it.
They doing a Littleton Boulevard one yet?
That's way up there in 2025.
Way up there? I'm talking about the transportation one.
So they're seeking some grant funding for some more corridor studies.
Okay.
I believe Powers might be one of those. Littleton Boulevard, I think they want to see and potentially work with planning on meshing some of those standards.
Littleton Mineral, some fiber on Littleton Boulevard, mineral jacket.
Try to get some signal alignment.
What did you say, HP?
Sorry, Historic Preservation Plan.
Historic Preservation.
Yeah. The Historical Preservation Commission is working currently on a work plan that will hopefully better advise to our future work with that commission.
FLUC.
Oh, future land use and character map, sorry. I used the.
Error correction, so I thought that might be an error that needed to be corrected.
Oh, no, No, that's what we affectionately call it, but that is the acronym, yes. FLUC is Future Land Use and Character Map, AKA Comprehensive Plan Map. Yeah, oftentimes communities call it that. For some reason, we decided to call it something different.
It's a flux capacitor.
Yeah, precisely. I will remove that in case anybody gets the wrong impression. Questions, comments, or concerns on this? And then I've got one other short
So-
item to go through.
I understand that, you know, when you say you'd like to move some of these things forward, or, you know, it'd be nice to move some of these things forward. And I'm looking at your color coding here, and I'm really kind of questioning why why platting and master sign plans would need a lot in the way of public engagement. Because that feels technical. Master sign plan, it feels like we would bring our sign plan into alignment with, you know, now, I'm assuming you're talking street signs? Or what are we talking about here? Signs?
Development signs. So we have a number of new multi-parcel developments, and our sign code does kind of a poor job of allowing for what you would consider to be fairly normal on a multi-parcel development. So, you know, those taller signs that might have more than one tenant on them, et cetera. So that's a little bit more what we're looking at. But no, we do, the yellow is supposed to be something that is more technical and probably sees less, you know, and we wouldn't do
Oh,
that.
okay, so it's not high, medium, low.
Yeah, the orange is the
Necessarily,
high.
okay.
The orange is the high, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't, okay. Yeah, well, I saw that, I guess I was thinking just, the orange is high engagement, yellow is medium, and green is low.
Sorry, it's orange, green, yellow.
Yeah, green
We'll work on the color.
I got myself,
Put
okay.
I'll put the
It's all good.
the
Okay.
legend back.
It's late,
in.
It
right?
just, yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
We'll put the legend back in, that's on, that's on me.
I feel like you're burdening yourself with a process that maybe isn't necessary at this point, never mind.
No, I think we're in agreement.
Okay.
You said you had one more thing before we close?
Yeah, I've got one more agenda item. If we have.
Final comments on the HULUC updates, all the state mandates?
No,
so-
other than thank you for the update.
Yes.
It's very good.
Really appreciate all the staff time that's going to be going into making these unfunded mandates happen.
Yes.
Sorry, that wasn't more comprehensive, but we did want to give you a high level view of what we think will be needing of change.
So, next item then, I guess.
Okay. Next item is pretty short and simple. I just wanted to have a conversation about future meetings and work plans. So the Historical Preservation Commission has been going through like a 5-year work planning effort. I was curious to know if the Plan Commission was interested in either doing something similar or I've heard some interest in other study session topics. So maybe it's not a full-blown work plan, maybe it's something else that the Plan Commission would like staff to work on and bring forward. I'm just seeking input on those types of items.
I think at minimum, we should have a study session on parking. This conversation today was just scratched the surface of it, but I think there's I'm all for a 5-year work plan or whatever that is, but I'd like to see at least a couple study sessions on some of these bigger.
I feel like we have so many topics that we just talked about, including parking and ADUs and different things that we need to put those into a work plan. And how those fit within these goals needs to be determined. But were you thinking focus on a particular goal area? Was that part of your thought, or just kind of in general, what
So
topics within these would we focus on?
yeah, well, first of all, gauging interest, the answer can absolutely be no as well. Second, what the Historical Preservation Commission is working on, HPC has been working on, is kind of the larger objectives and then getting more targeted for a shorter time frame. So the larger objectives would be kind of that 5-year objective, and then the goals are things that that they want to accomplish were more like in the 1 and 2 year time frame.
It seems that based on the direction that we have been going and our legislative direction, I guess, that some of these things might be difficult, because we've kind of gone the opposite of this in the last year, and perhaps that's because of all the changes in staff and whatever, but, you know, we haven't had study sessions that we always did before, and we don't meet regularly, as we've discussed, and I think unless we, you know, decide and commit to doing that, then this would be difficult to implement. So we would really need to have commitment that, you know, we're going to have study sessions, that we do have these topics that we will be working on. That's my opinion.
Yeah, we're gonna have the one study session on ADUs, and I thought it was a good conversation, and then we're gonna get changes by the end of the year. I don't know that, I mean, we haven't brought anything back to the table on that.
And even the middle.
There are some missed opportunities on a lot of different subjects that we're not meeting.
And the missing middle housing that you just talked about, Patrick, that's huge. I mean, once that gets established as to what does that look like, that we then need to figure out how do we incorporate that into the work that we do. So I think there are so many topics right now that we could probably fill in a, you know, some kind of chart, whatever, based on these goals, and that we have a bunch of tasks that we've already outlined, is what
And I
I'm saying.
think Patrick brought something up too about, you know, when you talk about these kinds of unspoken limiters, right? Okay, well, you're zoned for, what did we say, 80 units for the lot, or 60 units for the lot, right? But you actually can't get 60 because it's in conflict with setbacks from neighboring neighborhoods, and kind of, you know, open up a discussion when we're talking about transit-oriented communities, right? Other ways, like, you know, that we might implement that, you know, in terms of not just higher density along those corridors, but also, you know, as you move just back from that, you know, the transitional housing moving to, you know, duplexes, triplexes, that missing middle, right? You know, before you get into, you know, maybe more spread out lots, and give ourselves the ways we could give ourselves more flexibility and give builders, you know, home builders more flexibility to you know, develop some of these lots that might not be in great shape or might be great targets for investment.
Some of the other barriers to that are like open space requirements and, you know, ingress, egress, and we came across that in a couple of projects that we reviewed, in that there's no way you could get that kind of density just based on all the requirements. I mean, you've done some calculations, you know, on the fly, we're like, we can't do it anyway, so. I mean, so it is a big picture of things that are, you know, that restrict the ability to get those densities.
Yeah, I think one of those with cottage courts, when we talked about that, those were nearly impossible to do.
Obviously.
One of the things that would bring up is that we probably need an update on what is happening with our transportation system. At least that, I know I'd recommended the meeting with the transportation board, but if that can't happen, we at least need updates on like what's gonna happen in the next 3 years to 5 years, as far as, just so you can anticipate where are all the improvements happening. I think it's a very important thing for us to know, as far as, you know, when someone brings the Lumen project to you or whatever, then, and here's the 16 different spots we need improvements, and are they paying for them, or are we paying for them, what's going on with it, what studies are going on. Those are important things for us to know, I think, so.
So-
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna clarify in case if somebody doesn't identified that these long-term goals are what city council set. So they're a little bit, they have some tweaks to them than what we had in the past. The long-term outcomes that are listed, those came from the city council, correct?
The items that I had shown.
Yeah.
Some yes and some were staff driven. Some of these are what staff has identified as what we are proposing to work on. The last time you saw this, it definitely got shifted based on other conversations. But yeah, some of these are staff driven, sure. But if I may, to your point, Commissioner, I can't agree with you more. That is an item that I've had on my list of tentative study session topics for a long time. We've had some engineering changes, and for instance, development review engineering is coming in-house. We recently, have a new hire. We're looking for another development review engineer, and we've had largely, and you probably heard me say this before, so I might be a bit of a broken record here, but an epic amount of development review. And so I've been hesitant to pull some of their time into an update while we're a little bit behind on the review. But it's definitely still on my to-do list, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is, I'm sure the people in Public Works are busy too, but I'm guessing those are the people we probably need to be talking to. Yeah, it is. And to go back to the development engineering standards, it'd be nice to probably see those before we get clobbered over the head with them. So, and have to interpret them, so.
Once again,
Yep,
do
I know.
not disagree. Also, the Public Works is working on a CIP. And so basically a plan for all that infrastructure improvement as well. So it'd be nice to maybe have it at one, but it might not occur for a little while. So we might have more of that transportation review, et cetera, and then go towards more of a CIP update as well.
Yeah, in the spring is typically probably the best time, because that's when they're gonna start all the projects. So,
Budget finalizes, we get a little bit better picture of what funding we have for those as well, so yeah.
So how does that play out on the historic preservation side for the 5-year plan?
They're still finalizing it. They've taken, so they meet once a month, and they've taken a portion of each meeting to make progress towards finalizing that planning effort. So they're not done, but they've tackled kind of the high level goals, and now they'll be looking at more of the 1 to 2 year implementation items.
Any other ideas for items on a potential 5-year plan?
I guess just that we incrementally would build on something like that.
I would like to see us at some point have a conversation about moving away from Euclidean zoning rules. I think there's a lot of communities that use farm-based codes, and we haven't, if anything, it's potentially something to create value here, because we're so concerned with what things look at. So, we haven't really had we've inherited, in a sense, the LDC from process that started 72 years ago, but there's a high-level conversation I'd love to have about what is the possible trade-offs with switching to a form-based code.
A lot of communities have contemplated going to a form-based code, and some have, and some have brought back uses as well. It seems like the trend currently is to try to blend the two, which is what the ULUC strives for.
Things like that are just, they're so high level, they're sort of like more of a philosophy about how we're going to proceed in the future. It's just hard to have that conversation, anything less than a sort of an open meeting, where we've had a little bit of material to look at, maybe communities that use form-based codes and get really up to speed on what the difference is between Euclidean zoning and form code. That's the kind of thing that you might be able to do in a more, I don't know, one of these things in the 5-year plan, you'll be talking about the long-term zoning realities for Littleton. We're getting in a lot of thorns about it. Tonight's PD overlay just highlighted sort of some of the trick points of what we've got going on. So that was something that's in my mind. And it came up today in the housing opportunities conversation as well. So there's ways that it intersects all these different conversations and decisions that we make here as a quasi-judicial board. I'm curious what the historic preservation's goals, what they're working on in the 5-year and then the 1 to 2 year, what their big picture goals are. Is it something like mid-mod mile? It's like a
Littleton Boulevard is something that they wanted to include, absolutely. I don't have them all off the top of my head, but education, outreach were several items. Better, say, signage and outreach for, say, historic districts or those, Littleton Boulevard, et cetera.
So very forward-looking stuff that they aren't doing necessarily yet, or isn't.
More surveying, because that's a large part of historic preservation is surveying properties to find out, what you think, if you think they're eligible or not. Those types of items. And there's also a trend in historic preservation to think outside of just the form of the building and think about cultural items and the people who inhabited or use those structures as well.
I think it sounds like we have some consensus that we should talk about having a 5-year plan and dig into a little more specificity on elements that could be included in it. I mean, staff certainly has a huge list of to-dos with, sort of the Littleton Boulevard plan and all the stuff the state's dumped on us. I'll happily add to the list outdoor illumination code, which we touched on a little bit with the ULUC, but the code could really use some updating. There are some standards that I think are generous compared to other jurisdictions, and then something that may come out of the housing discussion and is somewhat related to form-based code, but the idea of sort of a pattern book for development where if we are looking at increasing densities, what's the form of that density and how does it relate to sort of the architectural character of the types of neighborhoods? I think the ULUC did some of that by, in alley-loaded areas, you can't have the giant 3-car garage facing the street anymore. That's a good first step, but, is there the potential, if we're gonna be talking about duplexes or motor cottage courts or something, to say this is how the community could design them, and to make them easy, here's an over-the-counter permit, if you use these plans, go forth.
Yeah, we did not include that in the NHO. We did hear that as an item. We felt that would take additional funding, resources, and definitely time to, if we do wish to develop those. The other item that we as staff are a little hesitant on is, in regards to that is, do we hire an architect, have them draw full-blown sets of plans? How often do we have to update them with building code updates? Those are all questions that came up based on our internal conversations.
Or you go to the form-based code and say, this is what it's got.
I'm gonna say that I think this is a conversation that I'd love our chair and vice chair to have with you and Matt and Mr. Knight. The community development director really has to drive some of this along with us, and I think that's a leadership conversation I think you guys should have with him and Jared, and I trust you to sort of I would trust you to sort of come up with whatever approach you want to take on it for this committee, but I feel his not being here and that's something that we need a rudder on if we're gonna have a 5-year sort of structure to this. It's something that's gonna go past my term on this board. And you know, it's.
Most of our terms,
And that's, and I wanna feel that it's very much driven by the top level interest in that, using this board for that purpose. And of course, I want council to want it as well. I think we're seeing the housing conversation around missing middle and ADUs driven by council. Sometimes they have really specific interests that they want us and the housing task force to do. And I don't know what other things council may want us to put on our 5-year horizon, but that's a leadership conversation as much as anything. I think my sense of this room is we're all willing and interested in participating in whatever whatever is brought forward in that process, that's all. So I definitely want to see the community development director buy into this.
Yeah, and Director Knight had a conflict this evening, but he does intend to attend future meetings.
I think we're all willing to have more study sessions too, to be perfectly honest. It seems like all of our meetings have been up there, at least since I've been on the board.
A lot.
And these feel like they're much more valuable conversations in my opinion, but that's just.
You've heard the feedback, so when you have your council members here and they're sending it to the city manager who's sending it to us going, what are y'all doing? We hear you, we know, as Jared spoke to, staff's been slammed, we've had some new folks coming on, we have projects in the city of Littleton that we've just never had in 40 years, and it takes up a lot of time, and not to oversimplify it or overstate it, coming up with a study session requires a little bit more staff time than simply just coming out with a topic like, hey, next Monday, we're gonna talk about missing middle.
If it's gonna be of any value, it needs to be prepared for properly.
Sure.
And that means.
Hours of staff
But-
time.
Yes.
We are
And
very,
it's- Yeah.
we are very thoughtful, though. We have a lot of really smart people in this room, some of those people being experts in specific areas that we're not. And needing to have that conversation, a more robust conversation, as opposed to, us thinking that we have all the answers and putting some stuff on paper and like, what do you think? Great, all right. Here's a resolution to sign and see you in a couple weeks. So, we understand.
It's no fun to stay here till 9:30 at night, I understand that.
We understand.
No, and I hope that, I was trying to put it a little differently than Reed, but Reed's exactly right. We've heard the feedback and we want to be, we want to be responsive to that, and make sure that we're moving forward in the way that the commission wants to move forward, so. That's the
It
goal.
feels like our hands have been tied to some degree to try to approach some of these subjects, tackle them. It'd be good to clarify that as well. Even saying you two meet with, well, can we do that? I mean, the rules have changed around even engagement, I think.
We've been chatting with the city's
In the
attorney's
last
office in
year.
regards to how we might be able to do something similar.
Okay.
We'll get back to you on that.
All right.
Well, some of the thought process between maybe pumping the brakes a little bit, I agree maybe from a 5-year planning, but pumping the brakes a little bit on wanting to have the chair and the co-chair meet specifically with the director and planning manager was that, trying to ensure that everyone's getting the same information. I will tell you, having been on past city governments and dealing with city council members, a city council member who doesn't have the same information that another city council member has in the past created tons of issues, and not in a good way. And so we're trying to be equitable in how we, as an organization approach kind of the dissemination of information as well as the gathering of information. Just so long as we're thoughtful about that, but I agree kind of having that rudder and something in place to make sure that everyone's in alignment going forward, as we look at kind of that future planning makes a lot of sense.
Set something up there.
Denied.
One last
Objection.
question, real quick. I understand, I did hear that we have a couple people out for the second meeting in September. Would we prefer to look towards the first meeting in October as a time frame to?
I'll be out as well.
In
I looked at my
September.
calendar, I will not be here on the 23rd.
That's when we were setting all the study sessions
know.
for everything that you wanted to
Yeah.
talk about.
That's why I'm not going to be
I've
here.
got,
Yeah, so.
I just booked something.
I'll
Video
Someone will have
conference in
to
at
be
like 1 in the morning.
vice chair for
Yeah,
that
somebody,
meeting.
a special appointee.
so if I get consensus, it sounds like maybe that's not the best meeting.
I could do it. I'm certainly available. I don't know. For you, yes or no?
I'm gonna be out of the country.
Karen? So there's three missing.
September I'll be here.
Craig, how about you? How's the 23rd look?
The 23rd I'll be here. That's, I think the first one in October I won't be.
Okay.
That was trade-off.
Yeah, no doubt.
When's your
If
23rd?
you're missing Radulovich, you might go fast.
So there's 4 in this room and
Patrick's
possibly Matt for 5 for the 23rd. So that's, I don't know,
You'd have
I
to-
know this is for the, what is the topic of that 23rd meeting?
Yeah, I think the topic that I was going to have was either working on one of these items or having the greater discussion about whether.
Oh, okay. So there wasn't a specific parcel or the housing options conversation. It was just a more high level, just a study session.
Either,
to talk
either
about
that
it.
or I can work towards trying to come back to you with more information about one of your items. If, for instance, and I wouldn't wanna do this while you're gone, the transportation system
That's fine. You
was
can
the
do it while
next
I'm gone.
one. No, I feel like that would be a dereliction of duty. But okay, I know the availability, so I can work on study session item.
It would just be hard to have a hearing without the chair and co-chair not here. We've had that discussion
Yeah, you're also
before.
out on the 23rd?
I am, yes.
Good lord.
Sounds like the 23rd is not a great idea.
Okay.
Study session on chickens.
What about the week after?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I vote for the Ducks.
What about the week after? You back, guys?
30th?
It is the
Yes.
30th. So maybe the 30th.
Barely.
Time shifted a week.
Actually, the first one in October is the 14th, so I'm back for
Yeah, I mean,
the 7th.
It's the-
The profound irony that
city
we
closed
complained
that
about not
day?
having any
I know,
meetings for
isn't
4
it?
nights and then we go, wait, that's.
No,
I
yeah.
can be there, I can be there. Very good.
September's busy,
Columbus Day.
no,
for
we're,
me anyway.
I can't
we're
make
still
it.
in session.
The 2 weddings.
Wait, is the county closed? No.
Closed on the 7th.
Okay, well, I will investigate potentially shifting it to the 30th. Sounds like that's amenable.
That works better.
That will work.
For our study session. High level study session.
If I'm not back by the 30th, I've decided to stay, so.
I don't blame you.
And that may relate. Okay.
Right.
Sure.
No, thank you for bringing up that topic.
Yeah,
I
we
really appreciate the discussion, and yeah, it does feel like, a missed opportunity between April and now, not having meetings, but understand the development review workload that, that staff is facing as well. So look forward to more discussion on this topic, and unless there's anything else, let's call the study session ended.
Okay.
Adjourned,
Second.
sorry.